Joining us now is Delegate Scott Taylor, congressional candidate, District 2. I got to get all this straight, Scott. Good to have you with us.
Good morning, John. Good morning, everybody out there. How are you doing?
Good. Definite mouthful here. Well, I'm excited because I'm a Donald Trump supporter. He is going to be the nominee. I believe he's going to win now in the first ballot. Big victory yesterday. And I guess...
5 big victories, right?
He ran the table, get out the broom, so to speak. Got all of the delegates but 5, or 4 actually. One is still up for grabs. And there's 57 in Pennsylvania that they're unaffiliated. But every bound delegate... Trump got all of them last night except 4 or 5 of them, 4 going to John Kasich as of right now. Ted Cruz getting shut out for the second week in a row. But we're not here to talk about that. We are here to talk about...
I will say I'm looking forward to this foreign policy speech today. I'm actually probably going to be on Neil Cavuto this afternoon critiquing it and speaking about it. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. I guess at noon, I think his foreign policy speech is.
Yeah, and it's going to be, they say, one of the most detailed addresses he's made. And, look, you got to make the transition now into giving details about what your thoughts are, what your policies are. So see how that goes. Look, you had a big endorsement this week. House of Delegates member from Virginia Beach, Republican Chris Stolle, coming out for Scott Taylor for Congress. You've also got Sheriff Stolle's earlier endorsement. What does this mean?
Well, Chris is very well respected. He's very well liked in his district, of course, which is Virginia Beach and parts of Norfolk. And I tell you, we had an event last night, John, and we had over 100 people there in Virginia Beach. This is the 16th one we've done around the district now. I think, you had Congressman Forbes on there. They spent close to a month trying to do a campaign kickoff, and they had, their 17 emails go out, and Ridgel was sending emails out. I think they had about 60 people there total. So if you minus him, his family, Ridgel, his family, all their staff, and people from Chesapeake, maybe they had 30 people or something. We had over 100 people last night at Froggy's on Shore Drive. It's the 16th event. We keep having those. We're having one tonight in Kempsville at Kelly's, and the energy's amazing. And it was just a great event. It literally was in less than 4 days, and it was with an email and a call, and that was it. And all those people come out.
All right, so you're getting big crowds, and you've got the Stolles, you've got some other endorsements in the area that are pretty big. So you've got that going. But look, financially, the financial records, Scott, just came out, and Randy Forbes has got $800,000 or $900,000 cash on hand. You've got 100. There's a 10-to-1 fundraising gap here, and you look at this campaign going into the final weeks, and a lot of people look at that and they say, yeah, you're getting people at your rallies, but you're going to be outspent 10, 15-to-1 by Chris LaCivita and his team in the final week. How are you going to win under that kind of financial?
Let's look at what's already transpired. First, obviously, he started with $700,000, mostly Washington money when he first came in and abandoned his district to come here. I will tell you that we have delivered over 2,000, and we just got 50 more requests in the past 2 days. Actually, 150 requests in the past 3 days of yard signs to people's individual yards. Everywhere I go, John, everywhere I go in Virginia Beach, when I hear, if I'm anywhere, any with different people, they're rejecting Randy. I think his hashtag is Stand With Randy. They're rejecting him because they know that he has abandoned his people to save his own cushy job and his own butt. He's going to have an argument on why that is, but people are rejecting it because he doesn't live here, and then tries to rent an apartment to look like it. I think you asked a great question and talked about the cash. Randy has spent over $300,000 already. Over, he reported spending like 230 some or something like that, but they sent out like 4 mailers right before the deadline because they were trying to bump his polls up. You should ask him about his polls. You should ask about his latest polls, because we're actually beating him in double digits in Virginia Beach, which is 62% of the district. So after spending over $300,000, we're still beating him. So, our ground game is amazing. We have a wonderful team. I'm known here. People, my whole district is in here. We were, our approval rating in our district, we've polled it twice in the past year, was over 90%, and that's calling both Republicans and Democrats. So I don't need as much money as him. It's important. Jeb Bush had a lot of money too.
Right.
You're a Trump guy.
Oh yeah.
Look at how much he spent to his competitors.
Well, not only that. He spent $170 million. He didn't make it out of South Carolina. Plus, you got Scott Walker, who was everybody's favorite going in. They blew through $150 million.
Yeah.
Rick Wiley, his campaign
He's already
manager,
spent over $300,000. If I had spent over $300,000, it would be insane.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to spend a bunch of more money. But think about this for a second. Let's say you emotionally don't like the fact that this guy, his people called in the 3rd district and the 7th district before abandoning the 4th district for the 2nd district. Let's say you don't like that. You're like, no, I reject the fact that you won't stand and fight for the people who have given you power all these years. When they need your power the most, they're in the same fight for Republican representation as you are, and you're abandoning them to save your own butt. Let's say you don't like that. How many mailers, how many commercials does it take to change that opinion? It ain't going to change.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So you can spend all the money you want and send somebody 5 or 10 mailers and let them watch a bunch of commercials. All you're doing is underscoring what they're upset about. So, spend all the money you want. Our ground game is great. We're doing really, really well. Like I said, I mean, we've delivered over 2,000 individual yard signs in people's yards, and those requests keep coming in. That's a big deal, man.
Okay, so let's just be blunt, Scott Taylor. We're going into the final stages.
I like being blunt.
I know that. We're going to the final stages of this campaign. Tell our audience, point blank, if you're going to be able to raise enough money to be competitive against Randy Forbes' onslaught in the final 3 weeks, where we know this campaign, we think it's about a toss-up now. It's going to be close. You're going to get outspent by a lot, 9, 10,
sure.
15 to 1. But the question becomes, are you going to have enough money to be competitive? Now, I asked the same question early on to Mr. Trump. I'm like, you're going to get outspent. You don't have a super PAC. Here's my question. Are you going to have enough money to spend? Are you going to put enough money in to be competitive at the end? And he said, absolutely. I'll do whatever I have to do. Now I'm asking you that same question.
Absolutely. I'll do whatever I have to do. John, we're in it. We're in it to win, man, and we're going to win. And like I said, he sent out 6 mailers already. We haven't even sent one out, and we're still beating him. So I mean, he's going to have all kinds of commercials and everything like that. But in the end, it's a June 14th primary. We're the only ones on the ballot. It's going to be about getting your people out, and we're going to turn out a ton of people. And yes, we will absolutely be competitive with money.
I had Congressman Forbes on. He talked a lot about the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. He also talked about legislation that he just put in, which I think makes a lot of sense, which is if ships are going to get repaired, they should repair in the United States at Newport News Shipbuilding or in L.A. or something, and certainly not on the Rhine. Okay, it doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, he's got that ability to do that. If you were to defeat him, he's saying, look, we're going to lose that influence there. I mean,
oh, my gosh.
How do you respond to that?
I tell you what, Randy Forbes has been more active in the past, 3 months than he has in the past 10 years. It's pretty amazing, all the stuff that he's putting in. I think he put that budget in with, that's a bunch of money that rebuilds the ships. But the reality is, John, you can put a budget in that's whatever the dollar amount is. But the reality is the law of the land today is sequestration. So if you're so senior and you're so powerful, number one, you should be able to run in your own district. Number two, you should be able to affect sequestration, which is what is actually gutting the military and making our readiness, our training, and affecting our warfighters worse than anything. So the little pie-in-the-sky theater stuff is not getting anything done. Nothing. So I want to get things done. So if he's so senior and so powerful and can stop everything from leaving this area, then he should also be able to deal with shipyard layoffs. He should be able to deal with what you see in the paper every 2 weeks. But that's not the case. I'm not saying I disagree with the law that you just mentioned. I haven't seen it yet, but I just off the top of my head, it makes sense, of course. But at the same time, if our ships are halfway around the world and they need to be repaired like right then. What do you do? Tow it all the way back? I don't know yet. So like I said, I haven't read that yet, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But I mean, we do have, of course, allied facilities, overseas and our own bases overseas as well, too. But it does make sense, of course, for our people to be able to fix them. But I haven't read his bill, but I have seen so many things coming out of Randy Forbes' office in the past 3 months that more than I've ever seen. It's pretty amazing.
All right, so let's get to some foreign policy. I want to get to the Saudis threatening us, saying, look, if you don't toe the line, if you pass legislation that would allow United States citizens to sue Saudi Arabia, even though we know they were involved somehow in financing 9/11, if you let Americans sue us, we're going to sell off $175 billion of assets and sink the U.S. economy. That's kind of a threat. Look, I mean, what do we get here out of this relationship with the Saudis? Help me understand what we get out of this thing. We've been protecting them forever, and we pay for that. What do we get out of it? And what is the Scott Taylor policy on these involvement with them in the Middle East?
Sure. Well, listen, first and foremost, you need strong leadership. And look, I've spent years in the Middle East, years. So they respect or fear power and strength, and that's it. So, from what I understand, what's in the papers, I haven't read them, of course, myself, but it looks like it might be some folks that are involved in the government somehow. They're not like senior leaders, but at the same time, I think it's time for the American people to see that. It's been, 15 years. I think they should see it. The threats that Saudi made, I would immediately. They need us way more than we need them.
Right.
One of the reasons why we've been supportive of the kingdom, and quite frankly, we're supportive of the Shah before that, is for American grand strategy, you need to have access to energy. Not access to energy so that you can drive your 18-wheeler trucks or your big SUVs. It's for world great war. So we knew, and Germany, of course, tactically they could have won a lot more battles, but they lost access to energy. So Field Marshal Rommel in World War II even spoke about that. Then once they lost access to energy, they were done. So that's something that American grand strategy for decades has been concerned about, is having access to oil in case they're having to fight a great war overseas. That being said, there's also a balancing act. You also have to balance, America's grand strategy is balancing the regional powers. The regional powers in the Middle East are Iran and Saudi Arabia, of course. So we've not wanted either one of them to become out of balance, which under this administration, Iran is absolutely out of balance. But at the same time, that's one of the reasons why we've, obviously stood with the Saudis and worked with the kingdom. But I wouldn't take their, I don't think they're going to do anything. I think it's bluff. They need us a hell of a lot more than we need them. And what we need right now in the White House is strong leadership that doesn't back down.
So basically, Scott Taylor, what you were saying is you would be an advocate of just standing up to them.
Absolutely.
All right, let me ask a tough question. I mean, we represent all of us throughout Southeast and Central and Northern Virginia. Our economy very much dependent on the military-industrial complex. There's no question. It is what it is. And we represent on our show, a lot of our listeners are veterans, and they've served in the military in so many ways. You're a former Navy SEAL. You've been injured over there fighting for us. But a lot of people concerned right now, Scott, that we keep getting involved in these wars over and over and over again. We have nothing to show for any of this, really. I mean, as tough as it is to say, they've been failures. We've got a crumbling infrastructure in the United States. Now we find out that we're going to need billions and billions of dollars for water supplies because our piping and sewage system all over the United States is crumbling. We haven't put the resources in it. You've served, you've been a Navy SEAL, you would be a strong advocate one way or the other. Everybody would take you seriously if you went to Washington. Are you going to be an advocate of keeping us out of these regional Middle Eastern wars, conflicts over and over, that I just, people are starting to fail to see why we keep spending money and getting our kids shot? Are you going to be an advocate of taking a hard look at this?
John, let me first say, look, I've buried more friends than I would wish upon my worst enemy in these wars. And, it's obviously personal to me and personal to many of my friends. And quite frankly, in the 2nd District, if there's any conflict anywhere in the world, we got people there.
Right.
So we're there. I don't believe in the nation building. I don't believe in occupation doesn't work. Historically, that stuff doesn't work. I think there were mistakes. But it's also easy for me to look back and say those things.
Right.
But what I would say to you is right now, and for example, you just saw the president put 250 more special forces in Syria. Well, in my opinion, Congress has failed. The Republican leadership has failed to step up. When I 100% blame Barack Obama for pulling out 10,000 stabilizing forces in Iraq. But at the same time, when we knew that we have to go back in there, they've tried to withhold. They haven't taken it up on a vote or anything like that to try to put political pressure and blame him for stuff like that. And yeah, there's a lot of blame to go around. But I believe that Congress, the people's representatives, have got to stand up and take votes and either unify the nation, whether we're sending folks in to help with Syria or not. Whatever the Congress comes up with, the people's representatives, whether we're going to be in there or not, I'm fine with. But I think we have to have a unified voice, and I believe that they have failed in Congress to be able to do that because they're worried about their own political seats. And meanwhile, you have people who are physically putting themselves at risk, and these folks are too scared to put themselves at political risk. And I think that's wrong for the nation and for the world, quite frankly. But I would say to you that yeah, there is some failing infrastructure here. And you look at Washington, D.C., and how bloated it is, and crushing regulations that come from unelected bodies up there, that Congress, again, has not stood up and said, you know what, if you got a regulation that's going to affect the economy by whatever the dollar amount is, maybe it's $50 million, maybe it's $100 million over the whole nation, that it has to come through Congress, and it has to be law. And, like when you look at the EPA, stuff like that, the crushing regulations, and the argument against that is, well, there's so many regulations. Well, if you put something like that in place, there wouldn't be so many damn regulations that are hurting our economy. I think the whole government needs a haircut. I think the whole thing needs a haircut. I think that you and I could certainly cut 5-10% from our budget at home if we have to. I think that should happen across the board. There is a lot of spending. Even DOD, which I'm obviously an advocate of military and veterans, but even the Pentagon's got to be reformed and how they do business and what they're spending. I look at Congressman Ray Forbes, and I looked at a hearing that he was at, and he talks about how I wouldn't be able to speak at a hearing as a freshman. Who cares? That's all theater. If I need a national audience, I'll get on Fox. But I watched him, and sequestration is the law, gutting the military. So DOD, they come to him and they say to the committee, and they say, this is what we want to cut. These are programs we don't need. But yet, no, you can't cut these. You can't cut these programs. But meanwhile, they still have to cut by law. So where does that fall on? The warfighter. TRICARE, they have to pay more. Less GI Bill. Because of programs that may be outdated that aren't needed, and they're extremely expensive. So there's fat to cut all around. And that might mean sacrificing somebody's congressional district where some things are built that are not needed to be built. So I think we should absolutely look into those things for sure. And I do think that Congress has got to step up to decide whether we send our troops overseas to fight on our behalf or not.
Well, look, we're almost out of time, Scott Taylor, but I just got to approach this final question. And you brought it up. We find out 250 troops, servicemen and women, go into Syria. I have no idea what this mission is. I happen to know one of them. Can't obviously say who. I don't know what that mission is. I don't know what our strategic interest is right now in Syria. I have no earthly idea. I'm concerned about, sending our kids back into conflicts, 250 of them. We have no mission. We have no strategic thing at stake in Syria. Assad is winning. I mean, why are we sending, and nobody's doing anything about it?
Is exactly why Congress has failed, and leaders in Republican Congress have failed to step up and demand that. They're the people's representatives, right? So,
yes.
Yeah, you're right. The battleground and the battle space changes exponentially very quickly. If like you would ask me a question about Syria 4 or 5 years ago, the answer is much different than now, because now you got Russia, now you got Iran plan, now you got their militias in there, now you got our people in there, and now you have our friendly, supposedly friendly Islamic folks over there being cannibalized by the more extreme folks. Now China's even talking about going there. So you have a battle space that has changed exponentially. So I think, yes, what the hell is the mission? And that's something that you have to have congressional oversight over the executive branch before we send our troops, our treasure, and our time over there. What's the mission? What is it? And that is where Congress has failed us time and time again.
No, they really have, because I want to know what our 250 young men and women are doing in Syria, why they're going, what the mission is, what our strategic interest is there, and why we're involved in it. And you're right. Somebody should be standing up and demanding answers for this before we just send our kids to get blown up. I am sick and tired of this nonsense. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network.
Me off that my buddies are going to go put themselves at physical risk for themselves and their family. And meanwhile, we got people like Randy Forbes jumping the damn district to save his own butt and scared to put himself at political risk. That is wrong. It's absolutely wrong.
We have no strategic interest in Syria, nothing at stake whatsoever. And I've said forever, I think Assad should be our ally. But having said that, that's just my foreign policy view. I don't know what our 250 young men and women are doing in Syria, and they're sending them there right into a rat's nest. And nobody is standing up for them, and I'm outraged over it. Scott, we're out of time.